we are extremely close to the line of control. In fact, we are the first and only media organization from around the world to have come so close to the LOC in the Machal sector. India's valiant soldiers are guarding the frontiers here from the enemy.
हमारे पीछे बिल्कुल जो एनिमी की पोस्ट हैं जो हमें सर्वेलेंस करती हैं और हम भी उनको सर्वेलेंस करते हैं। हमारा दिया हुआ टास्क के ऊपर हम सभी ट्रूप अलग अलग ग्रुप हो जाते हैं और जब भी मिलिटेंट्स ने इन्फिल्ट्रेशन करने की कोशिश करी है हमने उनकी हर नापाक हरकत को नाकामयाब किया है। सुबह की शुरुआत उन वीर जवानों को याद करके करते हैं who sacrificed their lives for the nation.
Hello and welcome. It is 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time in India, and we are back again with a fresh edition of India at the Rate G20. Today we bring to you the local perspective of the G20 agenda. It is a fact that the world is more urban today than ever before. Today, more than half of the global population lives in cities, and this number is estimated to rise. By 2050, cities will host 2/3 of all people. Cities also consume over 75% of the world's energy and are experiencing the impacts of climate change firsthand. So effective global action on issues ranging from climate emergency, addressing inequality and sustainable economic development requires productive dialogue between the national and local levels of government. In view of this, in 2017, U20 was launched under the leadership of the then mayors of Buenos Aires and Paris to bring together mayors from major G20 cities and inform the discussions of national leaders at the G20. In simple words, the idea behind G20 or U20 particularly is to bring the urban voice to G20 and raise the profile of urban issues in the G20 agenda. The city of Ahmedabad is the U20 chair for 2023. So on the show today we ask, how can India's G20 presidency contribute to addressing pressing global urban challenges? I'm Manman Bhattacharya. First up, the headlines. Gujarat Chief Minister Bhupendra Patel launches Urban 20 logo, website and social media handles in Gandhinagar. Ahmedabad is the chair of the Urban 20 cycle for 2023 and will organize City Sherpa's inception meeting on 9th and 10th February 2023 under India's G20 presidency. Urban 20 is a G20 engagement group that provides a platform for cities to facilitate discussions on key issues of urban development. Gujarat Chief Minister says U20 initiative is important since the majority of the world's population will shift to urban areas over time. Union Housing and Urban Affairs Minister Hardeep Puri shares his vision for U20, says he sees it as a great opportunity for global peer learning. G20 officials make a presentation to Dr. P.K. Mishra, Principal Secretary, Prime Minister's Office on G20 meetings held in India over the last few weeks and the support received from all states and union territories. G20 meetings last week reflected a whole-of-government approach while showcasing Indian culture. And India to convene first joint finance and health task force meeting on Tuesday, meeting to be held virtually. Gujarat Chief Minister Bhupendra Patel launched the Urban 20 logo, website and social media handles in Gandhinagar today. Ahmedabad is the chair of the Urban 20 cycle for 2023 and it will organize City Sherpa's inception meeting on 9th and 10th February 2023. It will also showcase its unique urban development and climate change initiatives besides its rich culture and heritage to the participants round the year under India's G20 presidency. At the launch, Gujarat Chief Minister Bhupendra Patel said that the U20 initiative is important since majority of the world's population will shift to urban areas over time, and Union Housing and Urban Affairs Minister Hardeep Puri shared his vision for U20, saying he sees it as a great opportunity for global peer learning.
Of the 17 sustainable goals by the United Nations, which are an urgent call for action by all countries in a global partnership towards fulfilling the Global 2030 agenda, the 11th goal of these SDGs is to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe resilient and sustainable. As India has taken over the G20 presidency, it's striving to take forward the goal of urban development and the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030. On these lines, Gujarat Chief Minister Bhupendra Patel kick-started the G20 programs by launching the U20 logo, website and social media handles in Gandhinagar on Monday, with Union Minister for Urban Development and Urban Housing Hardeep Singh Puri joining virtually.
U20 एक विशिष्ट कॉन्सेप्ट है जो पूरी तरह से शहरी विकास पर केंद्रित है। दुनिया भर के शहरी विकास के लिए प्रसिद्ध लीडर्स के लिए यह साइकिल चर्चा के और कलेक्टिव एक्शन के लिए एक बेहतरीन मंच है। U20 साइकिल भविष्य के शहरी विकास और जरूरत पर विश्व भर के विशेषज्ञों के लिए चर्चा का केंद्र बन सकती है। इस कार्यक्रम की प्राथमिकता में पिछले U20 साइकिल को दौरान बनाई गई लीगेसी पर ही आधारित होगी, जहां कई वर्षों से शहरी विकास के लीडर्स आम चुनौतियों पर चर्चा और विचार विमर्श के लिए एक साथ एक मंच पर आते हैं।
Ahmedabad is the chair city for the 6th U20 or Urban 20, which involves the solidarity of cities with the objective to deepen their collaboration to collectively find common solutions that are in sync with the overall objectives of the G20. Ahmedabad, a UNESCO World Heritage City, is set to host various U20 meetings between the 9th and the 10th of February next year and in July next year as well. The U20 Mayor Summit will be held where urban development issues will be discussed.
India is rapidly urbanizing, with the likelihood of it adding a population more than the size of the entire United States to its urban areas in the next 2 decades or so. Urban development has been a top priority for the Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji. Since 2014, we have designed and implemented various missions and schemes covering water, sanitation, housing, development of smart cities, urban transport, etc. It is only fitting that this year India will be hosting this initiative. I see the U20 as a great opportunity for global peer learning and also to showcase the pioneering work being done in Indian cities.
U20 is an engagement group under the larger intergovernmental forum of G20 and plays a vital role in contributing perspectives, concerns and ideas from cities to inform and enrich the overall G20 negotiations. It is a city diplomacy initiative comprising cities from G20 countries. It strives to establish a lasting practice of engagement among cities to develop a collective message that emphasizes the role of cities in taking forward the Sustainable Development Agenda. So what can U20 under India's presidency achieve? It can work towards engaging in meaningful policy making and investments towards fulfilling the Global 2030 Agenda. Because with mindful planning, India can set a new balanced template. For instance, while delivering on the Paris Agreement, New Urban Agenda and 2030 Agenda, India can reinforce direct investment in areas such as sustainable energy and mobility transition. Most importantly, U20 2023 can reinforce the importance of local regional involvement for the integration of perspectives at the national and sub-national government bodies as the way forward. With inputs from Devshi in Gandhinagar, Bureau Report, DD India.
And joining us now is Kunal Kumar. He is Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Also joining us is Praveen Chaudhary. He is a Deputy Municipal Commissioner of Ahmedabad. And also joining us is Dr. K. Rajeshwar Rao. He is former Special Secretary with the Niti Aayog. Such a pleasure to have all three of you on this special broadcast, India at G20. Mr. Kumar, I'll begin with you. Why to your mind is city planning so central to a global effort like G20?
Well, if you look at the three most important change drivers in the coming future for all of humanity, it's going to be probably urbanization, the way we use energy, and climate change. And all of them are all integrated to each other, they're not separate. And if you, so you look at the future of urbanization, most of it is going to happen in countries like India. In fact, it is fitting that at this juncture, India is leading the U20 agenda with Ahmedabad as the chair, because a lot of the urbanization effort that is going to happen in the world over the next couple of decades or so should be led by countries like India, because that's the place where the largest amount of urbanization is going to happen. And if you look at the kind of things urban planning touches upon, it has to be, environmentally responsive. We have to ensure security of natural resources through our urban planning, whether it be water, whether it be our natural habitats. We have to also look at climate finance, one of the most important areas of work to fix, the negative effects of climate change is to look at climate finance. One of your issues which you highlighted as part of the presentation which was just made is about leveraging local identity of cities. How can that be leveraged? How can economic opportunities be created? And how can we improve governance, planning and finance in cities to be able to create better outcomes? And last but not the least, how can we use technology for all this to happen? How can we catalyze better digital urban futures? So these are important issues and deliberations on them amongst G20 countries, which probably have close to 60% plus of the urban population of the world, which produce about 90% of world GDP, 80% of global trade, is a fantastic opportunity for India to lead that effort and create a lasting impression on how this effort is taken on in the future.
So the whole world over time is going to now settle in urban areas, and hence planning of urban areas is extremely important. But coming to you now, Mr. Chaudhary, since we are talking about a local perspective here, as the Deputy Municipal Commissioner of Ahmedabad, which in itself is a force to reckon with when it comes to urban planning, what are the kind of urban infrastructure projects of Ahmedabad that you would like to showcase to participating cities under the U20 initiative of G20? Could you unmute yourself, sir?
Ahmedabad is extremely honored to host such a prestigious event wherein urban leaders and planners from across the world would come and sit together, discuss various urban issues and suggest a way forward to the entire world. So, city has already done a lot of work. In last 2 decades, Ahmedabad has witnessed an entire transformative journey. There are so many projects which are worth shown to the city participant cities, like Sabarmati Riverfront development, Kankaria Lakefront development. Then in urban mobility, city has done a lot in BRTS, in water SCADA. Then under the ambit of Smart Cities Mission, Ahmedabad city has been pioneer in implementing ICCC, Integrated Command and Control Center, wherein more than 6,000 CCTV cameras are installed across the city. Citizen has always been the center in planning of the city. In all kind of planning, citizen has always been the center. And digital initiatives like comprehensive complaint redressal system, we would also like to showcase to the participants. And city, we would definitely like to showcase the best practices by the city to the entire world.
Right, stay with us, Mr. Kumar. I understand you have to leave us in some time, so I'll come to you again on what do you think about what Mr. Puri, the Housing and Urban Affairs Minister, had to say at the launch of the logo of U20, that this is a great opportunity for global peer learning. What is it that India can showcase to the world in terms of its urban planning models, and what is it that we can learn from the world to upgrade our urban infrastructure at the same time?
Well, if you look at what is happening in India right now, is cities are at different levels of development. So you have tier 1 cities, you have tier 2 cities, you have tier 3 cities. So we need to develop differential models that suit each of these cities, and these models have to be developed locally. So that's the effort that India has to look at, and that is the effort that is being done through various government programs. What we can learn from the world is how has this happened in other places? What are the challenges that have been faced? What are the ways of building capacity in the local government to respond to urban citizens better? How can we improve the use of technology and in our urban governance? And how can we improve our ability to garner more finance to be able to build more infrastructure and create better infrastructure in our cities? Well, India at the moment, as I said, is at the cusp of rapid urbanization. 30+%, 35% urban today, is going to be close to 53-55% urban by a very conservative estimate in the next 20-25 years. So, India is the place where the world is looking for leadership in the coming years as far as the urban areas, development of urban areas is concerned. And this is going to be the template which will drive not only urbanization in countries like India, but also in a lot of African countries, South Asian countries, where most of the urbanization is going to happen in the future. And this is such an adaptive field. So always this learning is important because there are no problems which somebody else hasn't faced. So if somebody else has faced some problems, you can learn from them and vice versa. So this is an incredible opportunity to lead that agenda.
Right, and then the question that arises is how do you take intention to action? But we'll take that further with the other guests. Thank you, Mr. Kumar, for joining us. I know you have a flight to catch, so please go ahead. Right, I'll come to you now, Dr. Rao, on since you are someone who's been closely associated with the centre as well as with state governments, and there has been ranking on SDGs of several states as well. Having said that, what do you think about how various priorities can be implemented by Ahmedabad as the U20 chair? The first priority being ensuring environmentally responsible behaviors.
Yeah, good evening. So, in fact, it's a great opportunity for Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad has been leading in several urban initiatives. But the larger agenda is not only Ahmedabad, but showcasing India's urban initiatives.
Right.
Because India have been showcasing several urban reforms. The recent one is urban planning reforms. Because since cities have to grow in a systematic manner, so urban planning has become a national agenda where the focus is on class 1 cities and also the other metro cities. And fortunately and interestingly, many of the cities in our G20 countries, they have similar problems like Indian cities. So that's why perhaps sharing these experiences, learning from our successful initiatives and experiments is a very big opportunity for the mayors who will be attending the Ahmedabad summit. And first, particularly, we have taken a lot of initiative in the empowering the urban communities. That is self-help groups, so that they will become partners in the city management and they will become partners in the city development, and we will give the effective feedback. That is number one. Number two, the basic services where we, as per the sustainable development goals and also the national agenda, so focus on urban housing, which is a massive agenda, and also the urban basic facilities is one of the perhaps a major thing to showcase to our other colleagues in the G20 cities. And India is, you are aware that it has given the constitutional status to the urban local governments, which perhaps is a very big learning or a experience sharing to all other countries to institutionalize the structural mechanisms to take care of the urban growth, urban management, so that cities will become centers of productivity, production, and also the engines of local development and also the local employment. So this is a very, very big opportunity, I think, to showcase, particularly our several South Asian cities. We are leading actually, and G20 cities also several good things happen in terms of the financial reforms, in terms of the innovating financial models, so that we can also perhaps our cities also can learn and also emulate certain things which are applicable to us. So these are the initial thoughts about this activity.
Right. I'll come to you now, Mr. Chaudhary. We are aware that Ahmedabad is going to see a congregation of cities not just within the G20 but also outside the G20. There will be observer cities as well. So this is going to be an occasion of exchange of best practices. Are you open to absorbing some of the best practices that you will be coming across as meetings progress over the next 1 year or so?
Definitely, it's a conglomeration of different cities We would also, as Honorable Minister Mahua told today in that video message, that it will be a great opportunity for peer learning. So it will be useful for the city also, and we would definitely showcase all the best practices which have been implemented in the city in last 2 decades when Honorable PM Sir was Chief Minister of the state, and how urban local body was strengthened in his times. So we are committed to bring everyone together, and these key priorities which have been put forth, these key priorities touch upon all the pressing issues of urban areas, be it any country, be it any city. So we are committed to bring everyone together, and we are looking forward for a healthy and participative discussion during the event.
Right. We are aware that there are 6 priority areas, Dr. Rao, under the U20. You've touched upon some of them already. But the question that arises is that how forward have been moved over the last 6 years. It's been the 6th year now of U20. It started in 2018 with the first summit. So what is the kind of forward movement that has been made, and how do we actually convert intention to action? Because this is not something that can be achieved in the short term. There has to be a medium term outlook and a long term outlook to urban development.
Yeah, there are plans are there, which are the short-term plans and also the long-term plans. And the cities development and urban administration being a state subject, Government of India have prescribed large number of guidelines. For example, innovative finance, there are guidelines are there, and also public-private partnership they are there. In fact, Gujarat we are mentioning now, Ahmedabad is one of the best showcasing examples and experience of the public-private partnership. In terms of the health sector and also in the finance sector. Being a smart city, it also implemented, it got several opportunities to do that. So this is this urban planning, urban management, urban rejuvenation, and also the taking care of the peri-urban areas. But this is an ongoing process, and we are very receptive. In fact, cities have so much of very vibrant leadership. Many cities in our country have absorbed many experience of the U20 cities and implemented it in broad sectors, particularly HR management, human resource management and capacity building, and also the innovative urban financing I just mentioned, including the public, private and community partnerships. Third is that responsible grievances mechanism and reaching the last mile, so that the most needy person of the city, who plays an important role in the informal and formal economies of the city development, they get the basic services. So perhaps it's a multi-pronged approach, but the challenges are there because the urban growth is so high. Again, it is limited to 8 to 10 states and also to 50 to 100 cities in this country. So same other G20 countries also have the same problem. So we are learning and experiencing, sharing, and perhaps we are changing our strategies and urban development perspectives on a regular basis. So that is what I thought I should share with you.
Right. Mr. Chaudhary, in your current stint, you would be translating a lot of intention to action, but you would also be encountering several challenges in making that turnaround, so to say. So would you tell us that how do you think whatever agenda is really brought out over the next 1 year as part of the G20, would you be able to translate that into action with the help of various G20 countries? What is the kind of planning in terms of pushing the priorities that India has identified through collaboration that you plan to go ahead with?
As we all know, Gujarat has done it in the past again, time and again, and during different vibrant summits, Gujarat has always successfully concluded those vibrant summits also. So city is very much confident that we will be able to bring together all the cities, because these priority areas which we have decided to deliberate upon, these areas touch upon all the cities of the world. So we are confident that all the cities would come forth and agree to come up with the common way forward for the entire world, so that since urbanization is going to be the key for future, so cities, we are confident that everyone would come forth, and the Communique will be endorsed by most of the cities. That would be the outcome of the summit.
Mr. Chaudhary, also, what is that one model that you would like to showcase to the world, which Ahmedabad is most proud of?
There are many, but like comprehensive complaint redressal system is one of the project which has brought citizen in the planning itself. So now that project, the CCRS, which we usually call it, so through CCRS, citizen can lodge complaint regarding any municipal services through telephone, through SMS, through WhatsApp, Twitter handle. So that data analytics, it is always useful for the planning of the next year budget also. So that project we would definitely like to showcase to the world.
Right, Dr. Rao.
Can I
Yes,
just add
please.
one thing here?
Of course, please do.
Yeah. So India's urban history and massive urban growth, in the ancient India, you take Pataliputra, or in medieval India, you take Vijayanagara, many other cities have evoked a lot of interest actually, because Mohenjo-daro, Harappa is already there, which have been established and which have been proved by their best urban management, including water and sanitation. So India's perhaps urban history is very rich actually. So I'm sure that G20 cities will learn, but several hundreds of years before, how India experienced this urban management, because urban management was linked to the trade and commerce during those regimes of the rulers. And now our urban management is a completely next level, where the human settlements are a focus, human-centric approaches are a focus, and development growth, inclusive growth approach. So I'm sure that this traditional and modern experience of India's urban would be a great fascination to learn for the many other G20 cities.
Right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chaudhary and Dr. Rao, for joining us with your views on urban planning under the framework of U20, which is under the framework of G20. Thank you for joining us. Meanwhile, G20 officials today made a presentation to Dr. P.K. Mishra, Principal Secretary, Prime Minister's Office, on the G20 meetings that were held in India over the last few weeks, along with showcasing the support received from all states and union territories. India's Sherpa for G20, Amitabh Kant, tweeted saying that the presentations to Principal Secretary of Prime Minister's Office in India were very constructive. He also added that it was truly a whole-of-government approach and a brilliant show of Indian culture. With that, we come to the close of this edition of India at G20. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time on DD India. Thanks for watching.
As the day unfolds and news and events take shape, we get you complete coverage of every news breaking in, tracking new developments as they happen. Midday Prime English, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. on DD News and DD India.
इतनी जल्दी पैसे डबल?
ओह, जमा करोगे तो फिर भुगतोगे। यहाँ लो। ऐसी लुभाने वाली स्कीम में पैसे जमा करना यानी धोखे की संभावना, इसलिए पहले पूरी जांच, उसके बाद पैसे जमा, नहीं तो आपके पैसे हो जाएंगे RBI कहता है
जानकार बनिए, सतर्क रहिए।
Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, show on national television Doordarshan about India's foreign policy, emerging trends in the global environment and how they impact on India's security and rise as a responsible power. This week, viewers, we are looking at a very important aspect of Indian foreign policy, which is how it should apprise the 800-pound dragon up north, which is China. China, of course, is rising at an alarming rate as far as democracies go, and India is no exception to that. Most of us have been watching with concern about China's power and influence, and also the methods that it's been using to try and penetrate democratic societies and influence politics and public opinion within these countries, as also intimidate, threaten and even coerce democracies to bend to China's will. So this is a number one foreign policy concern for India as well as for many other democracies, and so we are taking up this theme of how democracies are rising up to the challenge of China, and how they could be vulnerable, but how they also have some strengths with which they can push back this Chinese encroachment and pressure. And to discuss this, viewers, I have a very interesting and important guest joining us from Sydney, Australia, Professor Salvatore Babones. Professor Babones is very well-known pundit on international affairs and geopolitics. He is associate professor at the University of Sydney in Australia and has written a number of books, and is also a columnist for foreign policy and an influential voice on the emerging global trends. Professor Babones, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Sydney, Australia.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Professor Babones, when we talk about China, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that, you know, it's expanding and its power has enhanced over the last decade or so, and there is definitely a push factor when it comes to China, the way it is trying to approach its neighbors and the international community at large. You are in Australia and you've been writing about this aspect for a long time. To begin with, what do you think is the unique threat that a large power like China, which is authoritarian, poses to democracies? And democracies, it's not just a geopolitical challenge, isn't it? Because there are many other aspects by which China is insidiously trying to expand and influence and interfere in our democratic open societies, taking advantage of our openness while it remains closed and blocked to the outside world through its firewalls and many other means of censorship. So how do you think this China threat has evolved in the last few years?
The first thing to understand about China is that it is not, in fact, an authoritarian country. It is a classic textbook definition of a totalitarian country. That may sound like a fine distinction to people, but in fact, these are two, both bad, but very different governance systems. Russia, for example, is a classic authoritarian country, a non-party quasi-democracy in which a strong man is endorsed by the major institutions of society. China, on the other hand, is a totalitarian regime in which the tentacles of a single dominant political party reach into every aspect of society. There is, in practice, no civil society in China whatsoever. That is, all elements of society are ultimately controlled by the Communist Party and by ultimately a small cabal at the top of the Communist Party of China. That makes China much more dangerous to the rest of the world than a country like, for example, Russia. Russia does pose a potential military threat, as we've seen in the war in Ukraine, but it doesn't pose much of an ideological threat. We don't see countries around the world wanting to embrace a Russian model of governance. We don't see a Russian Belt and Road Initiative trying to sign up other countries. We don't see very effective Russian efforts to undermine democracies in other countries. I mean, as we all know now, the narrative about the 2016 election in the US was all a lot of hot air. There wasn't any serious Russian attempt to undermine American democracy, and there's no serious attempt to undermine other democracies. I don't want to exonerate Russia here. I want to distinguish between the kind of threat Russia is, primarily military, to the kind of threat China is. China does have its tentacles inside democracies around the world. It has, especially in the English-speaking countries, where there's a very large Chinese diaspora, it maintains a strong influence on both the Chinese language media but also on the English language media, which is something, again, that an authoritarian country would have a lot of trouble doing. So China is certainly a threat. It's a military threat, but it's a much bigger threat than authoritarian countries because it is at heart a totalitarian regime.
It's a point well taken, Professor Babonis. Yes, it's a totalitarian regime, and you use the word tentacles, and I think that's right, because that's the way it's been spreading. I mean, a lot of malicious interference and influence operations in rich industrialized democracies that we have seen from the UK, the Europeans, Canada, the US. A lot of them have been unearthing plots involving, Chinese operations to manipulate their politics, their public opinion, and to sow dissent in those societies, to even mold the opinions of influential figures like members of parliament and people in the media and the academia in favor of China, and essentially a kind of it's beyond lobbying. I mean, this is a kind of gross interference, and you are in Australia and they even had to pass laws preventing meddling by foreign powers through these devious means. So why is China doing this?
China is, frankly, attempting to gain political influence in the countries in which it has operations abroad. Those political influence operations are sophisticated, they're state-directed, and they're very well funded. On top of that, Chinese technology platforms pose a further threat. So when India had the confrontation with China a few years ago in Galwan, of course, there was a physical pushback at the border, but probably the more important pushback was to prohibit Chinese platforms from operating in India. TikTok on the phone, or more nefariously, WeChat on the phone, or Alipay as a method of payment. These directly threaten privacy, and through privacy, security in the countries in which these platforms are allowed. On top of that, there's also the more old-fashioned direct forms of simple bribery of elected officials and political parties. And not just those, I mean, institutions more broadly. Universities have been a major target of Chinese influence operations. Because our institutions in the West, and when I say the West, I mean that I probably should not even say the West, I should say in the free world, because I mean to include India and Japan in this, for example. Because our institutions in the free world are generally open institutions, they're very vulnerable to that kind of approach in a way that more closed countries wouldn't be.
Very much so. And on this, viewers, I'd like you to listen into a joint press conference by the heads of the domestic intelligence of the US and the UK, the FBI and the MI5, where they are warning about how China is penetrating their societies and creating trouble in these countries and actually trying to undermine the democratic frameworks of these countries. Let's watch this and continue the discussion.
The heads of the FBI and MI5 appeared together for the first time on Wednesday in London to warn of the threat posed by China. FBI Director Christopher Wray said the government in Beijing was the biggest long-term threat to the US and its allies. He pointed to both economic and national security concerns.
The Chinese government is set on stealing your technology, whatever it is that makes your industry tick, and using it to undercut your business and dominate your market. And they're set on using every tool at their disposal to do it.
Wray also warned businesses against what he said were the practices of the Chinese government, saying it was using every tool in order to steal technologies. MI5 Director General Ken McCallum said they had more than doubled efforts against what he called Chinese activity of concern.
The widespread Western assumption that growing prosperity within China and increasing connectivity with the West would automatically lead to greater political freedom has, I'm afraid, been shown to be plain wrong. But the Chinese Communist Party is interested in our democratic, media and legal systems, not to emulate them, sadly, but to use them for its gain.
Just last week, US lawmakers unveiled a bill to block exports of US personal data to countries like China that they say pose national security risks.
Viewers, you just got a glimpse of the problem the threat that democracies are facing, where the heads of the intelligence of two advanced democracies are warning us that there is a very systematic attempt to infiltrate, to steal data, to steal industrial secrets, to manipulate opinion, and even to impose Chinese viewpoints on free-thinking societies. I want to go back to Professor Babonis on this. Professor Babonis, there is a lot of counterintelligence work going on around the world, and like I said, plots are being unearthed, but it doesn't seem to be deterring the Chinese. They are quite determined to keep on trying to do this, and possibly because we haven't raised the costs enough and actually retaliated against them enough, we meaning democracies, both the advanced democracies as well as leading developing democracies like India. So on this front, what more can be done apart from detecting these operations and neutralizing their effects in our societies, which is a defensive action? But can we jointly also promote more of a focus on human rights problems and atrocities and even genocide which the Chinese are committing on their own soil against minorities? In other words, fight back in a way that raises the cost of this kind of nefarious actions of the Chinese.
There's a lot we can do to convince other countries to join us. And when I say us here, I mean the grand us of the major free world countries that have been pushing back against China. So the United States, Australia, India, Japan have all been pushing back against China. But South Korea less so, continental Europe and the European Union much less so, countries in Africa much less so, countries in the Muslim world much less so. They should all be joining us in this because they're all at risk as well. I mean, as we just saw in Sri Lanka and the terrible events of the last few years in Sri Lanka, the China threat is not a threat specifically to the United States or to Australia or to India or to the West or to the free world. It's a threat to everybody. Now, that's something that otherwise neutral countries should be asking themselves, is it worth taking some kind of small Chinese subsidy in order to compromise our integrity? If countries around the world all showed integrity, then China would find very little opportunity to infiltrate our societies. Now, of course, we should be calling out human rights abuses in China. I'd like to see more of that. I've done that myself, and I encourage everyone to do so. But calling people out will only go so far. Ultimately, we have to put our money where our mouth is about that. Are we willing to buy products from companies that engage in such abuses? Are we willing to visit, once coronavirus ends, are we willing to visit a totalitarian country as tourists? I mean, I enjoyed being a tourist in China when China was opening more and more and liberalizing more and more. Now I would be very uncomfortable going to China as a tourist, despite all the amazing tourist sites there are to see in China. So I think we should start treating China like the evil totalitarian country it is.
Absolutely. And on the point about fragile developing countries, Professor Babonis, you mentioned Sri Lanka already. There's Pakistan. There are at least 40 countries that have been identified which are in hock to China, with 10% or more of their total public debt held to China. There are some countries where even 40, 50 or more % of their entire foreign debt is held by China. So essentially they are extracting their pound of flesh through those means too. And some of these fragile countries, democracies are shaky, and you can see overthrows of regimes as a result of the ill effects of the Chinese embrace and what we call the debt trap diplomacy. So throughout their extensive Belt and Road initiative, they've created these dependencies, and they're coming home to roost now. And we may see many more dominoes fall the way Sri Lanka happened. People talk about Zambia in Africa. There are a bunch of countries like Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan in the Central Asia, and quite a few in Southeast Asia as well, that are highly vulnerable to Chinese debt-fueled collapses. So this is where the onus lies on the more advanced democracies to shore up, I think, the order before the Chinese infiltrate and then surreptitiously take over prime real estate for running their geopolitical agendas.
What those loans represent are corruption. Not every loan, not all the time, but many of them represent corruption. And we saw that in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's problem was not that it couldn't afford to pay China the debt service it owed. Sri Lanka's fundamental problem was that the government in Sri Lanka, or those who ran the government, had become beholden to Chinese money provided on concessional terms. It was fundamentally a corruption situation. Now, I don't think that Western governments or free world governments more broadly are responsible for providing more money because someone else is willing to offer corrupt funding. The funding is there. Now, there's never enough funding for projects in developing countries. That's always a problem. But the Chinese funding is not gone to replace Western money that simply was insufficient. I think that narrative is entirely wrong. The Western money is still flowing, and even some quote-unquote good or clean Chinese money is flowing. For example, from the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, all indications are that their loans are relatively clean. But much of the money coming directly from China as subsidies has gone for corrupt purposes. It hasn't gone for development. It hasn't been a lack of Western finance that's resulted in them. It's been the greed of developing country leaders who often see the opportunity to borrow money from China that they never intend to repay as a allowable form of corruption. And the onus is on them.
Yeah. So governance systems are being eroded in other ways. Corruption that is imported from China is weakening the institutions in a lot of these fragile developing countries. Professor Babonis, there's also the trade aspect. I mean, China's predatory trade practices have flooded the world markets and have destroyed local industries and created major socio-economic crises in many countries, and it's only the last few years that democracies have started pushing back and imposing more and more barriers, because earlier, especially the advanced industrialized countries, the OECD countries, were happy to trade with China with the open arms and were enabling China's rise. And now we seem to have at least understood that we've created a Frankenstein, if you like it, and they are grabbing world markets, and their companies destroy local competitors and try to create monopolies. So this aspect is also a major threat, isn't it?
China is not a market economy. Now, the U.S. President Bill Clinton made a determination that China was a market economy now, I think, 23 years ago. It wasn't a market economy then, it's not now. That determination allowed it to get into the World Trade Organization, in effect. China is not a market economy, which means that its businesses are not playing by the same rules as businesses in other countries. That's profoundly unfair for businesses who come up against Chinese state-sponsored competition. It's a real problem because if the Chinese government is willing to milk their own population in order to support a small number of favored oligarchs, those oligarchs can undercut prices in the rest of the world and put other companies out of business. Well, maybe the way out of it should be tariffs, but having led China into the World Trade Organization, now it's very difficult to impose compensating tariffs on Chinese products.
Yeah, so there is a quest for a decentralized globalization where China no longer remains the focal point or the centerpiece around which all the global economic activities revolve. There are also efforts to create resilient supply chains that diversify production and trade networks out of the Chinese ambit. But of course, it's a work in progress. Viewers, China's also been threatening countries directly, especially in the Indo-Pacific and in Asia, through the traditional military means. Its expansionism, its increasing territorial claims on not just India but a range of countries has really brought the peril home to a lot of countries that believed initially that maybe we'll just have to contend with China's rise in an economic realm only. But no, I think the classic gunboat diplomacy or coercion, military coercion, is very much around. And I'd like you to hear from well-known Indian commentator and writer Gauri Dwivedi, who's written a book called Blinkers Off, where she's talking about this expansionist mindset of China and Chinese leadership of Xi Jinping and how we should contend with it. Let's listen in.
Xi Jinping is a man who's only competing with history, and he's competing with two dead men, that is Mao Zedong or Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping. Both of them had major military achievements and major economic achievements which are part of their legacy, and Xi Jinping in his third term now wants to better that, and the only way he can do in his mind is by changing the status quo against China's neighbors in the immediate neighborhood. And that's why it has made those claims which are not just laughable, but they connect to a larger plan, which is that it wants to change status quo. Now take for instance the recent events that have unfolded. Now China has made 5 very laughable claims, but put them together and you will see a strategy of military aggression and massive expansionism at its very core. It made a laughable claim, the Chinese state media, that Mount Everest was actually sitting on Chinese territory. Believe it or not, in May this year, Chinese state media suddenly discovered that Tajikistan's Pamri Mountains were actually part of Chinese territory. It gets better. It also made claims to Bhutan's eastern sector, which has an impact not just on Bhutanese foreign policy, but also has an immediate impact on India's sovereignty. Then it made a claim in Japanese waters that Okinotori, which is the southernmost point of Japan, actually was in China's maritime waters. Now all of these have one objective at its very core, which is that bit by bit keep expanding, keep having the salami slicing of territories, both on land as well as on marine waters, to ensure that the status quo keeps changing, but at the very same time it doesn't invite a military pushback like the kind Russia invited when it invaded Ukraine. So that is what the objective and the strategy has been for China and for Chinese President Xi Jinping, to expand military activities and expand China's geographies, but at the same time do it tactically in a manner that it doesn't face a concerted pushback from Western countries or from the developed world.
So viewers, you just heard from Gauri Dwivedi about how China is making quote unquote laughable claims, but it's not a laughing matter, because they are also trying to push those claims using brute force and using their asymmetry in terms of military power vis-a-vis their smaller neighbors. Professor Babon is sitting in Australia. Australia has also woken up to the Chinese threat in last few years and has taken a bold position. The point is that in Asia, when you look at the Indo-Pacific region, the Chinese are building the fastest growing navy with a huge carrier and submarine and missile arsenal, and they are imposing conditions, occupying territories through salami slicing step by step, and even threatening to invade outright and occupy Taiwan. So there are different gradients of Chinese bullying tactics that we are facing in Asia, especially countries like India, which are right next door, which have disputed territorial and maritime boundaries with China. Now, what is the limit to this? And we have formed the Quad now, and there is a talk of a Quad Plus, although that's not taken off yet. Before it gets worse, we need to get our act together and form larger coalitions of like-minded countries, isn't it? I mean, the US is there, but the US commitment often is questioned by many in the region, and there are doubts about how much it will come to the rescue of any one of these countries if they are directly attacked by China.
We talk about countries in Southeast Asia not being sure that the U.S. will rescue them or the U.S. will have their back. That's entirely the backwards way to think about it. The question is, does the Philippines care about the South China Sea? Does Malaysia care? Does Indonesia care? If they don't care about it, why should the U.S. intervene to protect it on their behalf? The U.S. is very far away. There's no U.S. strategic interest in these areas, no great strategic interest. Okay, now, the reason the regional countries have not pushed back aggressively is that China is only grabbing areas that have little to no economic value and have no population. India is a nation state there to defending its honor and its territory. Well, in the South China Sea, we've seen countries in the region behaving much more almost like rational companies, saying that why should we fight over this island that in any case is unoccupied and has no population and very little economic value? I guarantee you, if countries in Southeast Asia were aggressively pushing back against Chinese expansionism, they would find very strong US support for their pushback. But if they simply say, we want to have good relations with China, but we'd love it if the United States came in and pushed back on our behalf, well, I doubt they'll get much traction there, any more than if the United States told countries to come fight its wars when it wasn't willing to put up the effort itself.
Yeah, so it takes two to tango, and I think what Professor Babonis is saying is that the countries that are directly impacted by Chinese hegemony and expansionism have to also stand up directly, and it's only then when we can get support from extra-regional powers or great powers who want to push back China or to contain China. The point is that we can't be wishy-washy about it, and we've got
I'm sorry, when the government of the Philippines is inviting China in, and it has been for the last 3 administrations in the Philippines, saying that the Philippines wants to invite Chinese investment, it's not concerned about Chinese aggression. Well, why should any country, I mean the US or anybody, say we want to defend Filipino islands that the Philippines is not willing to raise a fuss over? That would just be silly.
Absolutely. So I think we have to also realize the threat that we are facing and not be ambivalent about it. I think that's the larger message of this discussion, viewers. The point is that China can grow and expand and threaten us only if we are willing to allow it to be. I think that's the bigger message, and if we get our act together, if we have clarity of national interests and we know what is our #1 national security problem in Asia, then I think China cannot march forward like a juggernaut, and only then will we be able to actually push it back as well. I want to thank Professor Babonis for his time. Thank you so much for your insights. It's been really valuable.
Thank you.
So viewers, do think about the China threat. I mean, some people call it a bogey, but it's becoming increasingly relevant to all of us, and our lives, our futures are dependent on whether we realize this threat early and stop it before it gets worse. Hillary Clinton, the former US Secretary of State, once said that I don't want my grandchildren to grow up in a world that is dominated by China. I don't think we want our children or grandchildren either to be in a Sinocentric world order. So we've got to stand up to this, and we've got to deal with the menace, all of us, each one of us, and also collectively as democracies. Keep watching Indian Diplomacy, and I'll see you again next time. Take care.
सर आपका केवाईसी अपडेट करना है, नहीं तो अकाउंट और एटीएम कार्ड ब्लॉक हो जाएगा।
सावधान सावधान, 2.5 करोड़ का इनाम मुझे। देखिए, अनजाने कॉल्स, फर्जी ईमेल्स, लिंक्स और जाली ऐप से अपना पिन, ओटीपी, पासवर्ड कभी भी किसी के साथ शेयर न करें। आप रहेंगे सावधान तो नहीं होगा नुकसान। आरबीआई कहता है
हमारा डेजर्ट आ गया पर हमारी चैंपियन नहीं आई अब तक। बिल भरने के पहले तो आएगी ना।
सो गर्ल्स, क्या हो रहा है?
बिल हो रहा है। चल अपना कार्ड दे। पिन दे।
RBI कहता है अपना पिन, OTP, CVV या इंटरनेट बैंकिंग पासवर्ड किसी को ना दे। ऑनलाइन बैंकिंग सिर्फ अपने ही कंप्यूटर, मोबाइल और सिक्योर नेटवर्क से करे। हाँ, ये खाने की चैंपियनशिप थी क्या? RBI कहता है जानकार बनिए, सतर्क रहिए।
Hello and welcome. You're watching DD Dialogue, the agenda setting show that decodes news breaks and news makers. You're watching DD Dialogue on DD India, nation's national news broadcaster, India's national news broadcaster, and I'm Sakal Bhatt. Viewers, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar once again called spade a spade, referring to December 9th LAC standoff with China at Arunachal Pradesh. Speaking in Indian Parliament today, he reiterated that Indian Army will not let China change the status quo along the line of actual control unilaterally and its current deployment along the frontier, clearly in order to counter Chinese deployment, which was scaled up massively since 2020. And the recent face-off at Tawang is not a simple chance encounter between troops on routine patrol, but a deliberate operation by the PLA to dislodge our own positions and get a foothold from a vantage point on the LAC, particularly in Arunachal Pradesh, in the Yangtze in Arunachal Pradesh. So we ask on DD Dialogue, was China aiming permanently to alter the status quo of the LAC unilaterally, by force, and why? On DD Dialogue, we're going to, in the next half an hour, look at these three big questions: the larger ramifications of India-China LAC standoff, the larger ramifications of the Galwan and Tawang, what we have seen. What is the larger Chinese strategy or the larger Chinese design when it comes to the LAC misadventures? What are the various geopolitical and strategic issues involved in the border standoff with China? And we're also going to look at the de-escalation and de-engagement strategy of India. And we will be joined by a high-powered panel in a short while from now. We'll be joined by our guests to understand various geopolitical and strategic issues that are involved in the border standoff with China, and most importantly, try to decode what is India's pushback strategy. But before that, let's take a look at this. Now, tearing into opposition's attack on the government, the opposition's repeated attack on the government. And remember, opposition is claiming that China is readying for war. India's External Affairs Minister